This is the aftermath episode of the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, where we talk about what happened. And boy, did some things happen in the last Bengals game. Week 2, the Bengals lose 27-24, a heartbreaker to the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to give some thoughts. We're going to give some opinions and break down what we just saw. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sharon, and I swear I'm not really that angry of a guy, John, but after last night, I pulled off my headphones and they snagged, as I told you before we took the air, they snagged on my hat. They snapped. So I'm going headphoneless. I apologize if I sound a little bit different to you and to our listeners. But how you doing, man? How you doing? 0-2.
For a little peek behind the curtain, before we started recording, Anthony told me that story, and he said that his headphones got caught on his helmet, not his hat.
Did I say helmet?
You said helmet, so I was picturing like you wearing a helmet, whether it being like, I'm so frustrated, I'm going to put myself in the game. Like, I don't know. I didn't question it. I was curious if you're going to tell the story to the fans, but I'm glad we got some clarification there.
Oh yeah. It was a hat, not a helmet. But anyway, that is, I gotta, and I was trying to reconnect them. The wire's still connected on them. They're wireless headphones, but the internal wire on them is still intact, yet they were just not connecting to our little platform here. So I'm going headphoneless. I apologize if there's any kind of difference in, at least on the negative side, in audio quality, but I think we're okay. Speaking of low quality, that is the kind of football that is being played by the Cincinnati Bengals at this point in time, John. Things were a little better this week, but that's not saying too much based off of what they put forth in week 1. Look, here, we're going to talk about some different things. I wanted to get your opinion on some of the things I touched on yesterday, though, on the post-game report, and hopefully people have had a chance to check that one out, either on YouTube or the Cincy Jungle Facebook page or on an audio streamer. Thank you, Rob. Rob says the audio is good. So, hey, all right. Small victories. Okay. But, John, I pointed out some differences and even a couple of similarities between the 0-2 starts for these teams and last year's team and this year's team. There are some points scored disparity, less this year, about 10 points collectively less this year than last year. A lot more points being given up by the defense this year as opposed to last year. Burrow turned the ball over far more, especially because of that Steelers game, than this year, only 1 turnover. Yet the team is still 0-2. I don't know. What do you make of it? I mean, is this because the talking point now is, well, they did it last year. They came back from it last year, so they can do it again this year. Similarities, differences, do you buy that? I don't know. That was some of the things I talked through last night when I was solo.
Definitely a Groundhog's Day vibe going on here for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's strikingly similar to, I mean, the offense was a whole nother level of inept in week 1 this year compared to last year. Like last year was mainly just Joe Burrow turning the ball over uncharacteristically. They still put up points. They still put together drives, but still, like, it took them about 6 quarters offensively, both seasons now, to look functional. And another similarity too, because people are talking about the defense a lot, is that last year, like when they played the Cowboys, the defense kind of got taken aback a bit. They gave up some big explosive plays on the ground, and they played a backup quarterback in Cooper Rush, and I don't think they were necessarily prepared properly for the offense that the Cowboys had with him at the helm. And I think a similar case was to be made against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Tom Monken obviously is the offensive coordinator there now. It's a completely different offense with Monken calling the plays. It's a lot more 11 personnel. And I think the Bengals kind of didn't really prepare that well to face a new Lamar Jackson offense because, like we talked about on the show, the plan in years past to face Lamar Jackson isn't necessarily to go all out and rush him and try to, penetrate the gaps as much as possible. It's more just to stay back and contain. Well, there was plenty of that. There wasn't very few amount of pass rush wins from the Bengals defensive line, whether that was by design or not. And it just allowed Lamar to just cook in the pocket. And he got, I think on average, 3.5 seconds before every throw. And that's really tough for your secondary to cover for that long, for that extensive amount of time throughout the entirety of the game. And when Lamar was, being as accurate as he was, it's just really hard to stop him. And he was definitely in a groove, and he was definitely feeling himself. And even in the few times when he wasn't pressure and was in trouble, he managed to get out of it because he's Lamar Jackson. So this is a new Ravens offense that the Bengals have to be prepared for. And I think it was evident when Lou and Rumo was talking to media today, they just weren't really expecting that type of passing game from the Ravens, and that's on preparation as well. But honestly, Anthony, this still comes down to the offense, I think, because in my own professional opinion, I think the defense has earned a bad game or two where the offense maybe picks up their slack, and that's just not. It's not been the case even when the Bengals have been good in the past few years, and it's just really hard, especially when your offense, I think, runs 8 or 9 plays in the first 2 drives, and your defense is out there for 3 times as much. Eventually, they are going to break down, especially against a team that runs the ball well, as well as the Ravens do. So it was obviously a bad showing from both units, but they both kind of built upon each other and how the collapse kind of ended up.
So you surprised me a little bit with this question that we're throwing out here, Blame It More, and we want to hear from the live viewers as well, or if you catch it after the fact, you want to get in touch with us about what you think the bigger problem is, the offense or the defense to this 0-2 start. Quite honestly, I was ready to maybe contradict you a little bit because I thought you were maybe going to say defense based on how you started that, but I'm with you. And last year it was the offense as well. I mean, again, you turn the ball over 5 times against the Pittsburgh Steelers in the opener. You're not going to win that game, even though they were in position to win it. That you're not going to win that game. So that being said, I look at this and I talked about this last night on the post game show. You touched on it here. To start the game, the defense lets up this huge drive, 13, 14 plays, 75 yards, half a quarter is gone. Okay. So then your offense trots out there, 3 plays, 2 yards, boom, your defense is back on the field again. So it's a 6-play drive where they get a field goal on that. I think there was maybe not a great punt by Brad Robbins on that one, or they got decent field position, but they moved up. And so or maybe that was the missed field goal opportunity there, if I remember correctly. But regardless, they're out there again. They're in position to get points, and then your offense comes back out on the field again, 3 and out, 2 yards. And then they come back out another time. They don't even get offensive plays because a fortunate punt return touchdown, but they're just not getting rest. They're not getting respites after, they let up points. They let up long drives. They are not getting rest. And then last week, I got cooked over at Baltimore Beatdown on the 5 questions by some of the commenters and Ravens fans saying, I don't know how this guy can say that the Bengals defense looked good last week. Well, I say if you're in Cleveland and you let up less than 150 passing yards to Deshaun Watson, you sack him 3 times and you create 2 turnovers and your offense doesn't turn the ball over, that's usually a formula for success and not a 21-point loss. So to me, I look at this, especially with the weapons that you do have on offense, the lack of explosiveness that we are seeing on offense, and then really, a really poor decision by Burrow in with that interception in the second half there to start off the second half. I'm pointing the finger at the offense, even though Joe Mixon is your most consistent player right now.
Yeah, I think getting the ball off of a rare miss, just Tucker field goal at about midfield to go 3 and out after that is just that's wasting points right there. Obviously, turning the ball over in the red zone, that's a 14-point swing because then the Ravens scored a touchdown a few plays later. There was just a lot of individual moments, even both Jamar Chase, I think all 3 of the Bengals receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, at least had a chance to get an extra touchdown this game, and they all either dropped it or they were out of bounds. Like one of them was more clear than the other. I think T had like the smallest chance of actually making that possible, but there were just a lot of points left on the board. And I know people want to have these sweeping generalizations or conclusions after 2 weeks as to why the Bengals are 0-2. A lot of this, guys, this is just the week-to-week stuff, though, and it can be identified in very specific situations, very specific moments. And the offense, I think, there's going to be the conversation of, yes, they found their footing, they put together actual scoring drives. Unfortunately, though, right now, the problem is that, like, there's the clear understanding that the offense has not taken the evolution that it was supposed to take from last year. And it's probably because they don't want Burrow doing too much. They don't want him moving around as much. There was supposed to be this huge emphasis on play action, getting under center to create explosive plays. They were 100% in shotgun yesterday. And that was probably by design because, again, the couple times we saw Burrow roll out, he didn't exactly look like himself. And then what happened. So, like, there's still the staleness to the offense just because there's probably only so much that they want Burrow doing. And now it's just a question of whether or not he can actually play. And yeah, it's just it's tough to, kind of generate explosive plays the way they wanted without implementing all the stuff that I think they wanted to do from the offseason. And we're just not seeing it yet. And also credit to Mike McDonald, phenomenal defensive coordinator. I think the Geno Stone interception was a phenomenal play by him. It was a good concept by the Bengals offense too. Like they're still doing decent stuff, but Ravens defense is also pretty good too.
So last year, the Bengals were forced, you talked about them running the all plays out of shotgun. I think that was also something that was sent over to us by Jordan Schultz, who does, some analysis and also some reporting and breaking news stuff for the NFL. He sent that directly to us, which was pretty cool of him to do so. And it was helpful information. And so when you look at it, last year, the Bengals tried a lot of stuff under center to begin the year. And then by about, week 4, week 5, we started seeing a lot more of the shotgun, the RPO stuff, and they reinvented themselves on offense. Not so much deep ball shots that they were doing over and over again in the first couple of weeks that wasn't working. So they went more to, a quicker passing style, all of that. Some of that was to hide, again, the offensive line issues. I think the offensive line is playing sizably better than last year overall. And you're having success with Mixon running the ball. But is this a time now, based on that data that you're talking about and Jordan Schultz put out? I mean, is this reinvent again? Or, because I had a day to think about it, because I talked about that last night. I had a day to think about it. They were getting in some rhythm finally in that second half, moving the ball, getting in the end zone. Or was that fool's gold because you're just kind of playing catch up at that point? I'm kind of battling about where we are with this offense right now.
I don't think it's fool's gold is not maybe the word I would use. I would just say it's very reminiscent to last year, where even the first Ravens game last year at Baltimore, it was the end of the game. It was a low scoring game, but it was the end of the game. There's like 10 or 8 minutes left. And the Bengals go on this long drive because they can't create explosive plays, but they march down the field and they end up tying the game at 16 or whatever. And then they leave some time on the clock for the Ravens to drive down the field, kick the game-winning field goal, and not enough time for them to get the ball back. If the Bengals were in position to maybe generate an explosive play and score quicker, then the Ravens would have had more time on the clock, and then who knows what would have happened. Basically, the same thing happened in this game when they drove 16 plays for 80 yards for a touchdown, and they left 3 minutes left on the clock for the Ravens to essentially chew the clock out because they were running the ball really well. So, both their touchdown drives were at least 13 plays long. They only had I think one explosive play in this game, and it was arguably the most creative play call in the game when they had the play action, Jamar Chase motioning towards the opposite side of the field, a rollout for Joe Mixon, who had ample space to run for 30 something yards or whatever. Yeah. So not having those explosive plays will put this offense back to where it was last year, where they were efficient, they were successful on a down per down basis, but it just creates very long drives. And that's what the defense wants, man. I know people are going to be continuing to harp on getting the run game more involved. If the run game does also not create explosive plays, defenses will just beg you to just get 4 or 5 yards a carry and just pray that you mess up at least some point in your 15, 16 play drive. If you cannot stretch the field and the defense just keeps everything in front of you, eventually you will mess up. And unfortunately, the Bengals messed up one too many times in this game. And so until they figure out a way to get those explosive plays back into the equation, and maybe that doesn't come until Burrow is 100%, these issues are still going to persist.
Yeah, I was catching pretty much all you were saying there before I hopped out briefly real quick. But I mean, again, are you confident in the way that the latter part of this game went, and it's now okay? Hey, it just took time. Be it Russ, Burrow gone, all that's taking time. We're going to start seeing the corner being turned overall here, or is it adjustments needed like it was last year? And I heard what you were saying about the run game too, and that makes a lot of sense. So I just am wondering about your confidence level in what we saw towards the end of this game yesterday from the offense.
I think, like, the more I think about it, like, people are going to look at it's a lot of the checkdowns or like the swing passes that I think are irking people. And part of that is, I think, Burrow getting a little bit too quick. Like, the middle of the field was involved a lot more in this game than it was compared to Cleveland, specifically with Higgins. Like, he had a really good game, and we saw like Burrow be more crisp and decisive on some of those in-breaking routes. Unfortunately, that's where the interception happened as well. But I think right now, again, I don't know how much of this offense is limited because of what Burrow can and can't do in terms of mobility. We saw some glimpses of it. Like, there was that scramble where he evaded a pass rusher up the middle and he leaped out into the air, and you figure, okay, he's kind of back as well. But like, we saw this kind of last year too, when he thinks that the defense is giving him space for his running back to get onto the side, he's going to take that flat route and that swing pass. But sometimes in this game, he was just a little too quick to get to that point, and I don't know if he just didn't want to hold the ball for as long as he wanted to in case he had to scramble or anything. There's just a lot of things that we just don't know, and we're not going to get clarity until he eventually gets healthy. If that ever does happen this season, we won't know what the evolution of this offense. I think at the very least, though, because again, the Ravens are coached extremely well, extremely disciplined. We've seen, like, we saw their backups and their reserves fill in well for the guys that were missing, right? So it's still a well-coached defense, and they were still able to generate successful plays against them. That's still a net positive, and still something that you can take going forward. But yeah, it's the stagnation compared to where they were last year and the lack of progression. It's ultimately why they're here right now. It's probably because of the injury.
Okay. Let's talk about who impressed, who didn't. I mean, there's some pretty obvious ones on the who impressed. Charlie Jones, that was an outstanding play. I mean, and of course the refs had to. The hockey leagues always have to be involved in things, and that's just kind of their MO. And so it took a little bit of the luster out of the play when there was a flag and they were going back and forth. And what was it? Was it a block? All that kind of stuff. Regardless, really nice play there from Charlie Jones, and that was the first touchdown of the Bengals 2023 season right there. So he impressed me. Obviously, T. Higgins, 8 catches, 2 of them for touchdowns. That's impressive. Who else do you have that impressed you this week?
Well, I want to give Charlie Jones some more credit with just some quick history here. It was the first Bengals punt return for a touchdown since week 2 of the 2012 season when Adam Jones did so against the Cleveland Browns. It was, I believe, the 7th longest punt return for a touchdown in Bengals history. It was only the 17th Bengals punt return in franchise history. And like you said, it was the first touchdown of the season. That's the first time that the Bengals' first touchdown came via a punt return. And it's only the second punt return for a touchdown for a rookie in this decade, aside from Marcus Jones, this decade being the 2020s. I think defensively, though, like, I think DJ Turner stepped up pretty well against Zay Flowers. Like, Zay Flowers, he had that vertical route over Cam Taylor-Britt. Phenomenal throw from Lamar Jackson. That's just an elite quarterback doing elite quarterback things. But there were times when DJ Turner was asked to cover Zay Flowers in the slot, and I think he handled that pretty well. I was curious as to what the plan was going to be to cover Zay Flowers, and it ended up being, for the most part, DJ Turner. So a solid game for him, especially as a rookie. Offensively, too, I think Orlando Brown has put together two solid games in a row. And again, the offensive line has looked pretty solid, too. Like, again, the Ravens aren't a blitz-happy team. I think they only blitzed Burrow like a handful of times in this game. And it was actually fairly well against the blitz. I think he was like 8 for 12 with a touchdown. So that narrative of Joe Burrow beating the blitz, it still exists, even if he's not as mobile. He still gets the ball up pretty quick. But again, the offensive line is stable at this point. Jonah Williams had a few bad reps. That's just going to happen with him. Fortunately, I think maybe one sack was attributed to him. But again, when you're losing in front of the quarterback's eyes, it's easier for the quarterback to adjust. And again, the losses are far and few between for him so far.
Yeah, Tim Lyons in our live Facebook says we definitely need to give the Mixon the ball more. He's only had 13 carries each game. I mean, that's another guy. I guess it's kind of obvious. I feel that he is running and looking really as some of the best, even though it's limited touches. He's kind of looked the best I've seen him look in a while. I mean, he had that great 2021 season. He's running hard, and what I'm liking about Mixon more this year than last, John, was that he's breaking that first contact, whereas that was, he's doing that far more often this year than he really in years past. That's kind of been the criticism with him. Big guy, he's got some decent speed for his size and everything, but big guy, he runs physical, and you're saying, man, why is he getting tripped up on first contact? That's not really the case as much through these first two games here. That may change, but he's been someone that impressed me. I didn't really know what to make of the game by Dax Hill yesterday. He was very active up there in tackles. He was doing a lot of different things, and then he got tasked with coverage on Mark Andrews, where Andrews muscled his way into the end zone on that short play. I felt like there was some good plays from him again this week, but then, he was on coverage for that touchdown. So what did you make of Dax Hill's game, and was he impressive to you this week?
Yeah, I think he was all right. I think Nick Scott, unfortunately, had a few more blunders. He was late to a couple of plays, and I think being late to the last play that he was in was ultimately why it was such a violent collision between him and Mark Andrews over the middle. But Dax Hill was fine, I think, in man coverage. Again, like, it was a game where I think either it was against, be it Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews, he was going to see plenty of time close to the line of scrimmage, and I think he had a good game. As far as Mixon goes, I agree. I think he looks spry. I think he looks decisive and everything. Again, though, like, I hate to keep going back to this, but like, even when Joe Mixon is solid and he rushes for a healthy yards per carry average on early downs, like the Bengals ran the ball 13 times, they averaged negative 0.08 expected points added per play. They had a success rate of 38%. In comparison, the Bengals were successful 42% times on early passing downs, and that's a terrible early down success rate for passing the ball. But it still just shows you the dichotomy between how successful a run game has to be to make up for a lackluster early down passing game. So yes, like, if Joe Mixon gets the ball more, I think, again, he looks solid, but it needs to be extraordinary to have a meaningful impact on an offense if the passing game does not hold its weight.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. We know that for I guess in my dummy speak, that's Mixon in the run game is not where this offense goes through. I mean, we know that, and so I don't want to say it's an added bonus when he is running well or anything like that, because you need some semblance of balance and you need effectiveness in the run game. But that is, I know people are harping for him to get 20 plus carries a game instead of 13 carries a game. And there is rationale to that based on him in that, 4.4, 4.5 yards per carry average this year. But like you said, sometimes there are runs on predictable downs or predictable runs on downs, and it's not effective. So they need to pick and choose. I do think he needs to get a couple more carries per game because he has shown to be effective. But the other thing with it too, John, is, I mean, they've been down. They've been behind.
Exactly.
So, it's when you're down 21 points against the Cleveland Browns on the road, you're not going to be, pounding the rock potentially as much, especially when Burrow's still in the game there. And then, of course, needing to, you're down at times at home by 10 points in this game. So, I mean, it's just, you gotta be more effective and obviously get things going on the passing side, and then things open up on the run. And we saw a little bit of that yesterday late in the game, but still, I think Mixon looks pretty good. All of that being said, there's some talk, and I don't know how closely you've watched it, but there's some talk now about these safeties. You mentioned Nick Scott, and he maybe had a couple of issues. Dax Hill has had a pretty good 2 weeks, I would say, overall. But the issues, I know we all said we just said earlier, like we were blaming the offense for this start again this year more than the defense. But are you worried about the inexperience, the new faces, everything at the safety position, and seeing some of the big runs given up and all of these kind of bigger plays given up, a lot of yards given up these first couple of weeks? Are you worried that the loss of Bell and Bates is showing really, really early here, or are you pretty confident that, hey, just get them some more starts, let them play a little bit longer, and we'll see things tighten up?
Yeah, I think Nick Scott, again, he didn't have his best game, and I think he may have been concussed twice in the game. I don't know. Like, he suffered like the first hit early in the game, then he was allowed back in, and the second one was so violent, man. So like, yeah, it was not his best game, but obviously, more important things are at stake with him. But yeah, it's been. We saw it in the preseason game against the Falcons, where he was kind of slow to react and slow to pick up on things, and we can just attribute that to him being the new piece in the second year. But I think it is still going to take a little bit more time before he's fully, immersed in the scheme. I'm not really that concerned with Dax Hill. Like, I thought he was okay against the Ravens. I thought he was good against the Browns. So like we'll see what his role continues to evolve as, and we'll see if Jordan Battle gets more playing time. He also looked pretty slow in terms of just being in coverage. So again, he's a rookie too. I think, like, where Chidobe Awuzie is right now is the question to me, because they're limiting how much he's playing. Rightfully so. He's coming back from a knee injury, but it was a great throw from Lamar Jackson over the shoulder for the Ravens' final touchdown. But that matchup between Nelson Aguilar and your number one cornerback, you're expecting your number one cornerback to make a better play on the ball and to stay with coverage a little bit better. And unfortunately, it just wasn't the case. Awuzie just lost the ball. He was just a couple steps behind. And yeah, so like that, obviously, I think Awuzie not playing up to his level matters maybe a little bit more right now than the safeties to me. But it may have just been something that we should have expected earlier on in the season, just because he's coming back from such an injury.
Yeah, that play kind of surprised me. I think it was out of the slot, right? Where it kind of Aguilar
slot filleted.
Yep. And Awuzie just looked behind and or a little lost on the coverage, uncharacteristic for him on that. But that was kind of a gut punch play also in the game, obviously. So there's a lot of talk. I'm seeing it. I haven't engaged in it much, but I'm seeing a lot of talk about Cordell Volson. Obviously, some PFF scores that he has been credited with the first 2 weeks have not been great. We talked about the offensive line as a whole seeming to be pretty largely improved off of many games last year overall. But you still had this PFF grade, this low PFF grade for Cordell Volson. And then, 3.5 quarters of good play overall from Jonah Williams. And then all of a sudden, Clowney just takes advantage of him at the end of the game as well, giving up two hits. I think maybe even one more pressure in addition to that, as well as a quarterback sack, going up against Williams there. So, again, 3.5 quarters of pretty good from Jonah Williams until the end there at crunch time when they're throwing the ball more. And then, of course, you've got these scores from Cordell Volson. What do you make of both of those guys?
So Volson, it's been two pretty good defensive lines that he's gone up against, specifically on the interior. The matchup has been pretty fierce, and yeah, he hasn't looked his best. It's still a question to me, like, what are the expectations with him? Because I think it's really, really dangerous when Joe Mixon calls him a future Hall of Famer, and there's all this talk about the second-year leap, and like, guys, it doesn't happen that quickly, right? These guys are, he's specifically still pretty young. I think he'll continue finding himself, and again, like the PFF grades, a lot, some of it is kind of baked into what the results of the bad plays were, right? So he was credited with 2 allowed hurries in each of these games, and I think I think when you look at the hurries that he allowed, it was in pretty critical situations. So the context of his specific losses are pretty significant, and for the most part, like I don't think Cordell Volson is playing so bad that he's holding back the offense. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, that's what anyone's saying. I think the state of the offensive line is obviously in a little bit better spot where they can kind of absorb some of this lackluster play, and they'll continue to see how he progresses and how he continues to evolve in the season. And again, with Jonah, like majority of the game. Like he looks like a stable, solid right tackle, but there will be a handful of plays every game where he'll be off balance, and maybe a guy will get him with a spin move. It's more or less the same story, right? If you want to beat Jonah Williams, you set up to the outside and you go back in, and that I don't think that scouting report is necessarily going to change. He's an imperfect player. He's a very league average player, and that's kind of the pitfalls that you accept for a player like that. But again, I don't think Jonah or Cordell are holding back this offense necessarily. And isn't this crazy? Like we've mentioned now that the offensive line looks pretty solid and the Bengals are still 0-2. It's just you never know how these things are going to go.
Yeah, so offensive line looking solid, 0-2, and only putting up 27 points in two games. So and 7 of those came on a punt return. So really 20 points on offense, right? Just not an ugly start for the Bengals and their offense. So let's talk panic button stuff before we because of course we want to end on such a happy note before we get out before we get on out of here. We're going to talk Joe Burrow, and then obviously where you are panic wise with the Bengals 0-2 start, 0-2 in the division to start the year. I said, I've talked about the importance a lot of getting a win, getting 2 wins leading up to these 2 games, and worst case scenario has happened. And now furthering that worst case scenario is Burrow appears to have retweaked his calf. To what degree? I think they're testing it out and seeing. So let's talk just, I guess, holistically, your mindset around the Cincinnati Bengals right now with the 0-2 start. And do you liken this to the team that, went on that 10-game win streak, including the postseason last year? We know they've got it in them, but it's a hard thing to imagine them doing twice, 2 years in a row. I don't know. Where you stand on this?
Last year, we didn't talk about the idea of aggravating an appendix that no longer existed. It was impossible. I mean, like a calf and a soft tissue injury is obviously completely different. When I hear players and coaches say, we've been in this situation before, so we're confident that we can get out of it again, I understand why they need to project that confidence, but there's a reason why there's never been a team that went 0-2 in 2 consecutive years and made the playoffs in both years. When you're in you're in a similar situation where your quarterback misses all of training camp because of a freak injury, odds are one of those injuries is going to be more severe than the other, and it has the potential to linger or just impact him for the entire season. And that seems to be what the case is with Burrow. It's not the vibe that I got from it was not necessarily good. And I think just the uncertainty with the way that he spoke about it after the game, Zach Taylor kind of be mum on the word during his press conference Monday. It's just, I think I would be kind of surprised if he ends up playing this week. I know they get one more day of rest because it's a Monday nighter, but man, like just the simple fact that he suffered it July 27th. And he was visibly practicing and running like 2 weeks after that. We all kind of assumed it was like falling into that grade 1 spectrum, right? Where it's like it's a couple weeks injury or whatever. The fact that he was still being notably bothered by it a month and a half later kind of signals to me that it was a little bit more than that. And it's just, it's tough, man. Like you hear Jamar back in August, he was saying that maybe Burrow should wait until week 5. And at this point, he kind of looks like he was right, because if Burrow was in the situation where he could easily aggravate this calf and make it even worse, like that's really bad for the rest of the Bengals season. So I'm not here to say that Burrow is going to go on IR or how many games he's going to miss, but I think this specific situation is just worse just because you have no idea about the state of the quarterback right now.
So I'm not saying this is my hope or anything like that. I just, my gut feeling, if Joe is told by trainers and doctors that are looking at this, his retweaking of this, I guess, or this continuing to linger on, if he is told that this is not a risk of, hey, if you go out there, this isn't going to, tear your calf, or this is, it's not going to lead to an Achilles thing or anything like that. It's really a pain management issue and effectiveness through that pain management type of issue. My sense is Joe isn't sitting. My sense is Joe would say, I'm playing through it. I'm going to be okay. And he's going to point to the end of this last game and say, look, we moved the ball. We were effective. And that was bugging me then, especially towards the end. Now, some people are saying it happened on that last touchdown pass. And that's really where the issue came from. Yeah. So, my point is I think if Joe is told that this is just going to be a nagging thing, and this isn't really a risk of a tear, an Achilles, a broken ankle, whatever, something more severe. It's more play through the pain and deal with it until it finally goes away. I think he plays. Just knowing who knowing what he's about, who he is, and everything. I think he plays through it. Now, if there is a message given to him like, hey, this could get way worse in some capacity. And I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know precisely how this injury would affect. And I wish I had that kind of expertise to relay to our listeners and everything. But I think if there's something where it says this could, somebody tells him this could lead to something pretty bad if you don't rest this properly, then we're talking about missing time, IR. But if it's more pain management, to me, I think he says, screw it, I'm playing.
Yeah, you said the magic word there, Achilles, right? That like if this has the potential to potentially be what Aaron Rodgers was, right? And that's very scary. It's terrifying. I'm sure that's what the Bengals are thinking right now. Like I think they're the only team with an MRI in the actual stadium. I don't know if Burrow got an MRI right after the game, but I'm sure he's either already got one or he's going to get one in the next couple of days. If that is the concern, then I would expect IR. Again, I don't know the specifics of if this is just a pain tolerance thing or if this, like, he did say that he tweaked it. So I'm willing to bet that it is at the very least like a minor strain, or it's just whatever the case may be. But man, well, I was going to say something. I don't remember what it was now.
It's Monday. I get it.
Yeah.
No, I get you. I just think where the expectations are for this team, his drive, he's always been that chip on the shoulder guy. So I think if he is told, hey, it's just play through the pain and nothing severe is coming from this, it's more just you got to deal with it. I think he plays, and I think he's telling people I'm not sitting for anything at that point. But if it's something that could be a domino effect, and again, I'm not a medical professional. I wish I was. We know, your calf stuff can affect your Achilles, and then, as some I think it's Elise here saying, he can't push off his leg, he has limited mobility. Yeah, but that brings me to then the question: then if he does go on IR, if he does go to the bench for a couple of games or whatever, what do the Bengals do? Is it Jake Browning? Is it a veteran off the street? Is it Will Grier? I mean, what do they do? I would be very interested to see what their remedy, short-term remedy to this situation would be. And I know you had the light bulb come back on and you remembered what you were going to say.
Well, to answer your question, I think there's the frustration of why it hasn't the offense kind of changed to account for Burrow's injury. They would have to change the offense for Jake Browning. I don't think that they can expect him to just operate at the same level of quick processing as they expect from Burrow when he's on the field. I think it would be Jake Browning. He is the official quarterback too. I think there's a good contingent in the fan base that wants to see what Will Grier can do, just because he had that phenomenal preseason finale, and that's the reason why he's in the building. Unfortunately, I think it would take a very bad performance from Jake Browning first before they actually get to that, just because Grier is new into the system. But we've seen crazier things in the NFL where guys are just kind of thrown in there unexpectedly, and they just ball out. They're just gamers. I don't know if that's Will Grier necessarily, but it would be interesting to see. Like, I think you got to remember too, he was an actual draft pick in 2019. He was the third round pick. I don't think Jake Browning was drafted at all. So as a pure college prospect, like, he had more talent compared to Jake Browning. He just hasn't really had that chance to ascend as a starter. But what I was going to say though is that when you're talking about like how this year compares to last year, if the Bengals drive had only lasted like 10 plays and they scored and they still lost, but Burrow didn't get hurt, the whole feeling about this would be monumentally different. Like it's someone said to me on Twitter, and I completely agree with them. It's a lot of projecting anxiety about what Burrow's going through that's just piling on to the concerns about the team in general. But if Burrow didn't actually tweak his calf again and they scored on that drive, even if they still lost, there would be more sense of optimism going forward. But again, if you don't see that Burrow injury, then you're not really fearing it as much. But it was always, I guess, going to be a risk, and this is just confirmation of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it obviously, and this is just a comment here, but obviously the Bengals turning things around after an 0-2 start becomes much easier without these concerns for Burrow and him playing if he does not play. So you don't think a veteran option out there, someone lingering out there, you think they're going to stay in the building if Burrow can't go?
It just seems like their style to stay in the building. I think an outside signing would indicate that, they'd be more aggressive. But I think that's also an indictment on Browning and Greer. And I don't think that's the route they're going to take, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think they'd at least give them a shot to see what they do in a game or games. And then, if it's just, then, they may go the veteran route, but
not Tom Brady. I'll tell you that right now.
No. Will brought up an interesting one here. Phillip Rivers, that would be get him out of retirement. That would be an interesting one for sure. I don't know that he would be down for 2 games or 3 games or whatever, but if that's what, or 4 games for IR, whatever the case is. But interesting thought. Let's get on out of here. I mean, this again, optimism is at a premium right now with this team between their start in the division. I do think in some ways the optimism is there again because of how the Bengals were able to kind of find some rhythm on offense at the end of this game last year. And then, of course, popping the big play on special teams and finding a way to get back in that game. But there are a lot of things that need correcting on both sides of the ball for sure at this point.
It's I don't know if it's the worst start imaginable, but it's pretty close, which means they can only go up from here, right? Right.
Yeah, nowhere to go but up.
Right.
That's right. Yep. Do you have any? Are we doing mic drops on this one? I forget, or is that reserved for our Thursday night show?
I think the mic is. I think it's already been dropped. It's remained on the floor since yesterday, unfortunately.
Okay, I want to share something before we get out of here. It's kind of a mic drop, right, I guess, but this picture was taken. Let's see. This picture was taken yesterday at my house. And this guy here that you see, apologies if it's a little small because I guess I could enlarge it a little bit, but it was on a phone, so I had to do it. But that is Jason, and I just got to tell this little story. That was us kind of like grieving after the loss there, and he came and hung out in my new kind of studio / garage, all that kind of stuff. Jason is a really great guy. I met him a handful of years ago in Arizona, and he came up to me. I was at a gym of all places in Arizona. He came up to me and said, "Hey, are you from Cincinnati?" I don't think I was wearing Bengals stuff. I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, you're the guy from that show, right?" And so he recognized me. I was very flattered out of nowhere. And I think I mentioned it at the time years ago when I met him that this happened. Well, it turns out he text messaged me this weekend on Friday, and he said, "Hey, it's a chain of gyms in Southern California. Is this your gym?" I said, "Yeah." And so I met him and we hung out. I got to meet his 5-month-old son, his lovely wife, and everything. He was in town for a wedding. And so I said, "Hey man, if you got nothing to do, it's probably just going to be me at my house and watching the game. If you want to come and hang out." And lo and behold, he did, coming off of a wedding. So you can imagine, and 10 a.m. So you can imagine he's probably maybe hurting a little bit, but great guy. And it was really cool to, hang out with him, meet his family, and watch the game with him. So that was a picture of us, but great guy. And it's cool that's what's kind of cool about doing this sort of thing. I'm definitely not the best at doing all this stuff, but it's cool to meet all of the people and connect with a lot of different people. Like cool fans and everything. So just a fun little story, despite the loss yesterday, I wanted to give a shout out to Jason.
I mean, that's just a guy from California gets recognized by a guy from Arizona because he's talking about a team from Cincinnati. You know, that's just
well, Jason is
can't
from
beat that.
Cincinnati too, originally.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Jason
yeah.
he's from Cincinnati. He moved to Arizona. He went to college there and just stayed down there. That was, you know, I was getting all the stories from him. So, but yeah, that's how we met. And he you know, once in a while we'd shoot texts and stuff. And then he is going to, as I said, I'm going to the Arizona game in a few weeks. And he's going to be there and go to the game. So we're going to meet back up again. But it was kind of a cool, cool deal. Kind of a cool, not twist of fate, but kind of just cool story, I thought. So I wanted to share it.
That is nice. I think if I had a mic drop, it would be UC lost to Miami for the first time since before the housing crisis. And I was really depressed Saturday. And then Sunday kind of made it worse. So we're on to better things. Because that was rough. That was rough for me personally.
We're on to better things, yeah. And going back to my little story with Jason there, you know, that this Ravens game was one of the ones I was trying to get to. I'm going to still try and get to next week, but we'll see what happens there. But that was one of the games, and I just couldn't do it. And so it was kind of cool to at least, you know, still be around someone from Cincinnati and another Bengals fan and all that kind of stuff, just with the story there. So cool stuff. Anyway, Bengals are 0-2. Thanks for entertaining my little my selfish story there, but it was cool. John, thank you, buddy. And we'll be back on Thursday to talk about the Rams. We're trying to round up a special guest here, so or two. So we'll see what happens with that, and we'll let you know about that. But if you are new here, you can get this show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk from Matt Minnick, as well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, all on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer. Do us a favor and leave us a review if you can. 5 stars if you would, but hey, just leave us a review if you can, please. And if you like the video side of things where you can see lovely pictures like that I just showed you, you got to go subscribe to our YouTube channel. The show icon is underneath John and underneath that Cincy Jungle icon there. So click that, click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. And then, of course, if you can, leave us a thumbs up on the videos there, and you got to give a thumbs up to Cincy Jungle's Facebook page with about 80,000 plus people. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say go check out all the great work that John is doing at A2ZSports.com and get your continued analysis, podcast videos, and everything on CincyJungle.com. John, have a better going on through the week here as we charge through and talk about Monday Night Football coming up.
Hey, you know, next Sunday you won't see a Bengals loss. I can promise you that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, guaranteed not lost. There you go. Appreciate you, man. And thank you to all the live listeners and those listening after the fact. We will be back later this week with more stuff on the show. Take care.